Here we go.
So here, if it was really Jesus telling Martha not to serve, not to be a deacon, then Jesus needed to learn his lesson and stand corrected. Our readings started with the gospel reading today. That was acknowledging that some of you may not like it. Maybe since you're a hard worker, or getting compared negatively against a sibling, or simply that you hear a criticism of what's much too often women's work. Maybe with a question of just who Jesus thought would make that meal and the bread and all of that and do the dishes if Martha didn't. So we started with the gospel in the place of what's usually the Old Testament reading, also as a mental reset. Well, though, if you already didn't like Luke, hearing implicit criticism of housework, of domestic labor, of what still is way too often known as a woman's place, then let me go ahead and make it worse and say that this may actually be trying further to diminish women's roles. It comes from the mouth of Jesus, and I really hope that it was the writer Luke who just put it on Jesus' lips. Martha has a strong social position, but what's more, hidden in the original language is that the tasks she's doing are described as diakonia. It's the word that gives us the title deacon, which became and remains a title in the church. Officially in the ELCA, we have pastors and deacons involved in word and service ministries. In the Roman Catholic Church, women still are not allowed to be deacons. And Luke is telling Martha and other women that they shouldn't be deacons. In Luke's sequel, the book of Acts, no woman is referred to as deaconing. There was a purge. The so-called better part that Mary has chosen is to sit passively in church, an instruction that no man is ever supposed to fill. Just listening. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't respond in any way. Mary remains voiceless. Maybe not Luke, but Jesus here is telling women that. If so, I'd put it in the category with the Canaanite woman when Jesus needed to have his worldview and the purview of his goodness expanded. So here, if it was really Jesus telling Martha not to serve, not to be a deacon, then Jesus needed to learn his lesson and stand corrected. Maybe even doubly.
Jeez.
See, for whatever you feel about Mary pitted against Martha, if the better part of sitting voiceless is actually trying to indoctrinate women's subservience in the church, then it got flipped around as a passage to promote Mary learning and has been used to foster women's theological education. If it were meant to keep women out, instead it's contributed to lifting them up. Take that, Luke or Jesus or whoever. Luke may have wanted to deny women as deacons, but in Priscilla we have an unignorable, authoritative early church female leader.
Okay. Wow. This guy, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what his name is. He belongs to the Evangelical Lutheran Church, which yikes. I don't know anything about those guys, but the denominations are all messed up. Especially now. They're getting more and more fractured, and honestly, the denominations are terrible. They're terrible places. They used to stand for something. There used to be like a homogeneity. There used to be a sameness. Like a denomination used to have distinctives, and now when you enter into a denomination, you find that they don't have any sort of unity anymore. And many of them are fragmented and fractured. In many ways. So, and you'll find like there's left and right in denominations and a mushy middle as well. And it's just crazy what's happening in denominations. They're just falling apart. So and a lot of the mainline denominations are just unrecognizable from 100 years ago, you know. Um, but this guy's crazy, and he is a heretic for sure. What he's doing is he's questioning the moral authority of Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ says something on a moral level, it's always right. Jesus on a moral level never sinned. So Jesus never in his entire human life sinned. He never did what was morally wrong ever. And he never also needed to be corrected on a matter of doctrine and theology. It says early on in his life, at the age of I don't know, probably the age of 11 or 12, maybe, he was in the synagogue teaching the teachers of the law. He was in the synagogue teaching people whose full-time job was to teach the law. So Jesus was perfect as it pertained to the faith and morals of what we believe. His religion, the religion of the covenant of Yahweh with his people, and Jesus being God, he established a new covenant and walked perfectly. So to question the moral authority of Jesus, the morality of Jesus, the rightness, the doctrinal rightness of Jesus and his actions, that is the assumption that underlies that is really a denial of the divinity of Jesus Christ. Because the perfection of Jesus comes from the belief in his nature, that there's a hypostasis, that there's a perfect person who is perfectly God and perfectly man. One person with two natures that are perfect natures, with the divine nature taking on the human nature. And so if you have a perfect divine nature taking on a perfect human nature, although the human nature can suffer as it pertains to physical suffering, it's a passable human nature. It still maintains its perfection. Jesus's human nature maintained its moral perfection and its spiritual perfection. So Jesus in his human nature was never corrected as it pertains to truth. He was never in error as it pertains to the truth of God's word, of his own word. I mean, so this guy is assuming that really the assumption that underlies this guy's theology is that he just doesn't believe that Jesus is God. He doesn't believe that Jesus is perfect and was perfect as it pertained to his knowledge and as of the truth and things that pertain to salvation, and as it pertains to his knowledge of his moral capacity, that Jesus needed to be corrected and shown the good. It's just, this guy's crazy and should absolutely, he's literally by saying what he just said, he's disqualified himself from public ministry. So yeah. And I mean, I think it is interesting though, when I'm looking at, he's critiquing Jesus in, this guy is critiquing Jesus in Luke chapter 10, where Jesus is dealing with the story of Mary and Martha. And he tells, we all know this story where he tells Martha that she's, troubled about many things and that she needs to become like Mary and just sit at his feet and listen to him and receive from his ministry instead of being busy and preoccupied with things that don't, matter as much as being with him and hearing from him and receiving from his ministry do. So, that's a fascinating point that I actually hadn't really noticed before. But yes, Jesus is, I love how this guy is pointing out what's going on there, and he totally hates it because this guy is a feminist, right? And he is, he's an egalitarian and he's a feminist, but really he's showing how there's a superior calling on women to sit at the feet of Christ and to listen to the word of Christ. And that's actually amazing, that like the call for women to be domestic is true. And Jesus doesn't negate that calling, but he does say that calling to be domesticated, to be homeward focused, can get in the way of the higher calling for them to sit at his feet and to be pious and to be to devote themselves to the things of God on a spiritual level. And I love that. I actually never saw that before, and that's actually brilliant. Even though this guy totally hates it, and he kind of pointed that out to me. I'm thinking, wow, yeah, that's actually a profound and a wonderful truth as it pertains to women. But this guy's pointing it out in contempt. But I love it. Not that he holds it in contempt, but that Jesus does teach that, and the scriptures do affirm that. I never looked at it that way before. It's fascinating.